Opening up the Peacock and Williamson mailbag on this Wednesday episode, as we do, which teams have a legit shot to win the Super Bowl? Which teams are actually playing the best ball on both sides of the ball? Which coordinators could become head coaches? And who's peaking? Who could be over their peak in the very near future? All coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock and Matt Williamson with you at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Love all the questions. Shout out, first of all, got to start with thanks everybody for all the questions. Always, we never can get to all of them, and we always have a lot of good ones and a lot of fun stuff to talk about on every episode. I want to start with this question, Matt, that was actually sent to you, and I was not tagged in it, and I don't know who sent it or what the exact wording was, but we've gotten a lot of questions like, okay, who are the real legit teams who could actually win the Super Bowl this year, right? And what was the other question sent to you? Was it just more focusing on defenses?
Yeah, and actually several people worded them different, but more or less were, who is best defense in the league? And the names that were really thrown out there more often than not were, of course, your Niners and the Cowboys. Someone asked, is it just a two-horse race between those guys? Who else is in that neighborhood? Who's number one? So I think, the short answer to me, I think the Niners are number one. I have a hunch you're not going to fight me on that, right? But I want to talk about some others.
I'm going to use some numbers just so people don't think I'm a homer out there about the San Francisco 49ers. And look, if you go through
this is good,
points allowed, rushing defense, yards per play, like everything, the Niners are just first.
Mm-hmm.
And this is graph form if you're watching us on YouTube. And if you're not, I'll talk about what this graph is that is on the screen right now. And Jason Fitzgerald from Over the Cap is the one that brought it up. And it's just a good visualization of what teams are good on what side of the ball as far as points. And that's the end goal, right? Is points, scoring points on offense, not allowing points on defense. So this graph is just.
And real quick, I love that this one is relative to schedule.
Yes.
That's important
exactly.
here.
Yeah. Based on who their opponents are, right? Because that's really important. You could have a really easy schedule and things won't look great. And the 49ers have played some good teams, have played some bad teams, and they've had a chance. We talked a lot about some teams that like the Patriots. And
I was going to bring them up. Yeah.
Who's the other? There was an NFC version of the Patriots. Now I can't remember which team.
Oh, yeah. There was. Who did we come up with? Oh, the Titans are just like the Patriots.
Or it was the Titans. That's what it was, right?
And
yeah,
Vrabel and Belichick.
Yeah,
and, right.
Bad teams, and they're not really as good against the good teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it might skew their overall numbers. But I definitely think it's the 49ers is the best defense in the league. And looking at this graph, essentially the x-axis and y-axis are offense and defense scoring this year. So how well is your offense doing is going to the right. How good is your defense doing? That's going up.
Ideally, you're in the top right corner. You're the perfect team. You want
to be in the top right. That's good defense and good offense.
Right.
As far as points, and bottom left means you're bad on both sides of the ball. It shouldn't be surprising to anybody that the furthest team bottom left is the Houston Texans. And it probably shouldn't surprise a lot of people that the Eagles are among the furthest teams in the top right quadrant. But the teams that are in the top right quadrant that are among the best in the league, above average, both offense and defense, points allowed, points scored, is the Eagles, the Bills, the Cowboys, the 49ers, the Bengals, and the Ravens. Probably not a huge shock. I think the Ravens might be the biggest surprise out of that group, right?
Yeah, but I think a lot of that's based on they were a lot better, in my opinion, the first 10 weeks or so of the year. I mean, their offense has really sputtered now for a month, and even before Lamar got hurt. But the defense is really strong. I think they're the worst team in that quadrant. And if you notice, the Vikings aren't there, even though they have a really good record. Or
Right. Yeah, exactly. And they have scored a lot of points, but their defense is subpar, and we're starting to see that defense get a little bit more taken apart as the season goes along for the Vikings. The furthest team on the right is by quite a bit is the Kansas City Chiefs on
Yes.
offense, but they're not on the upper part for defense.
Below average defense, not
Yeah,
even an
below
average
average
defense.
defense versus
Yeah.
versus schedule, regulated by schedule. So but and it's funny because the team with the best defense here and everything you look at points to the 49ers being the best defense. The Cowboys aren't even the next best based on the points here. It's the Bills are next, then it's a few teams that are kind of tied and very similar with the Cowboys, the Jets, the Patriots, and the
Denver.
Denver Broncos, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
I
and
wanted to talk about them a little bit.
Denver's interesting because they're the worst offense, but they're top
Right.
five defense here. And the Buccaneers aren't that far off of a similar vibe where their offense just isn't going, but they're playing these really low scoring games and they're winning some and losing some. The Broncos are just losing them all, but the Bucs are able to win some of those games. But both of those teams playing pretty well on defense and just not up to snuff on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, again, if we're just asked to, if the question, we lumped them all together and they said, "Hey guys, rank the best defenses in the league." Well, I would have the Niners 1, I would have Dallas 2, and this graph backs that up extremely strong for the Niners, a little bit for Dallas, but there's some others in the mix. But I did want to spend a minute talking about Denver because their defense has been unbelievable this year. And I don't know, I think it still stands, but you threw this out a couple weeks ago that if the offense would have just scored 18 points a game, they would have been 9-1 or something like that. It was something crazy along those lines. But my point is, what if they got a little bit of help from the offense? Like playing with a lead for once. Yeah. How about closing out a game with a 7-point lead and the opposition has to throw in a loud Denver stadium, like you never get those advantages or time of possession. I don't know what it is, but I'm sure it's bad for Denver. I mean, how many times does Denver's D just stones them, goes to the sideline, opens up a Gatorade, takes one sip and is back on the field? You know what I mean? Like give us a little bit of help. And I'm shocked and I'm commending Denver that their defense hasn't totally crumbled this late in the year from what they've had to deal with from the other side of the ball.
The Eagles are really good. The Cowboys are really good. The 49ers are really good. The Buccaneers are really good. The Chiefs are really good. Those are my answers for the teams that have a legit shot to win the Super Bowl. Bengals are also there. I would be skeptical to put the rest, even though, versus their relative to their opponents, the Baltimore Ravens show up well here. I'm a little bit worried about them on the offensive side of the ball.
I like their D, though.
I do like their D, absolutely. And the rest of the teams, any of these teams could win. Like the Dolphins can win the Super Bowl. The Vikings can win the Super Bowl. Any of the teams that get in the tournament could win, and we see that it's not that uncommon for one of the wild card teams to go win and beat the other teams and be playing for a Super Bowl, right? But if I'm laying down cash on the teams that legitimately have the best shot to win a Super Bowl, it's Chiefs, Eagles, Bills, Cowboys, Niners at this point. All right, we got more questions about which potential coaches are the hottest candidates around, which is always a tough question to answer. And which quarterback had the best final season if this is Brady's final season with guys, Hall of Famers like Manning, Montana, and Favre? And some of those guys had pretty poor ends to their careers. And this isn't going great for Tom Brady right now as well. And which decent to good teams will be peaking and falling off into 2023 and 2024. All those and more coming up next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have the access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. All you do is you add your job to your business's profile, your purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. And then you utilize the 800 million wide network of potential applicants. You're not going to get 800 million applicants for your job, but hopefully among those applicants, you're going to get the right people for your job. And you can use simple tools like screening questions, make it easy to focus on just the right candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who it is that you would like to interview and eventually hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Have you checked out the new football podcast at Audible? We're sure you're going to love some of these. There are some really good ones. One is called Block Forever by former All-Pro offensive lineman Ryan Khalil. And you can also find a sneak peek of the new Think Like a Champion, available right now as a bonus episode on Locked On Presents. Think Like a Champion is a brand new podcast from Russell Wilson and Audible. Russ is an interesting character. He's become even more interesting as his team is performing, and he is performing poorly, even versus before when he's been a Super Bowl champion. And you find out what makes Russell Wilson tick here, alongside co-host Harry Wilson and the late Trevor Moawad. They dig into how high-performance athletes, artists, and leaders push the boundaries of their potential with guests like Super Bowl MVP Von Miller and NCAA champion Tim Tebow. Discuss how to find your unique personal mission in the world. Each episode features interviews with Olympic medalists, NFL stars, and business leaders, and you can find it at Locked On Presents right now, a sneak preview of Think Like a Champion, or catch the full series available anywhere you get your podcasts. Available now, Audible, get in the game. All right, Matt, I want to talk assistants because this question's always somewhat difficult to answer, and we get the question a lot.
I love to avoid it.
The reason we get the question a lot is because the simple answer is we don't know. It's so hard to know. And Scott says, who are the best head coaching candidates among current coordinators?
Yeah.
And the reason it's so hard is because teams don't want their coordinators taken away from them. And it's not a very easy thing to find out. And the people who know these players the best are inside the building. And since we're not in 32 buildings, it's really hard to know until you start hearing those hot candidates and you hear about who's going to get hired or who's going to get interviewed after the season ends for the various jobs that are out there. And I also think it's a pretty inexact science when it comes to a lot of things that happen in NFL off seasons. For as smart as these guys are, as much money is involved when you talk about player scouting and coaches and hiring, it's still kind of a weird, wild westy process that there's a lot of secrecy and purposeful secrecy. And so the simple answer is, I don't know, but I think you could probably guess at a few of them, and you go find the successful teams and you go find the successful head coaches and go find who's directly under them. And those guys are going to get interviewed.
Yeah. It's far from a perfect process. And I avoid it because I know that I don't know. And how do I know that I don't know? Because I was in the walls. And when you're inside the walls, inside the building, you realize who the good assistant coaches are. I mean, we had a longtime dude, Bob Junko, and he was our defensive tackle coach. He's a Pitt legend, and he was never aspired to be a head coach. He was a great recruiter. Like, there should be a statue of Coach Junk. Yeah, but he was unbelievably respected, and no one else knew it, because he's not getting interviewed. He doesn't want to. He's happy where he's at. I mean, and there's many, many instances of that. So inside the walls, from a media person and what we do for a living, not knowing these people as human beings makes this extremely difficult, let alone what they do behind the scenes. But I do have some candidates or some guys to discuss. The first one I'm going to throw out there is the Lions offensive coordinator, but I think he's next year at this time could be a hot name. I mean, I think that's a kind of a long shot there. I'm looking at the Chiefs. Has Bieniemy's ship sailed? You had mentioned Kafka off the air. I think he's an interesting one. I think Ryans is an interesting one on defense. Same with the Bengals defensive coordinator, Lou Amarillo. I always kill his name, so I just make fun of myself when I say it. And I also think two staffs that are going to have a hard time keeping guys are definitely the Eagles and the Bills.
Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
If you want to become a head coach in the NFL, go start as a quality control for Andy Reid.
There you go. It's a good start.
Right? Because
pay him to work for it.
Right. And that's where that's where Mike Kafka went after he was a quarterback, right? And I think it was Jason Kelsey maybe that was talking about some crazy a time. I don't remember who it was. Someone was talking about they were with the Eagles, Andy Reid's head coach. Then like Mike Kafka is one of the quarterbacks, and
Mm-hmm.
like Nick Sirianni, I think, was on the staff as a quality control, and Doug Peterson's like quarterback coach. It was just like this. They're all
Like
right now are
Gruden was
going to
on
be
that
head
staff,
coaches, and
or
they're all together
yeah,
and
yeah,
at
yeah.
the same time. And it's just like, oh, okay, they're just incubating coaches. The 49ers are a great example. D'Amico Ryan's about to be the third head coach that gets hired out from under Kyle Shanahan. So
I love those pictures, and there's many of them. Like, here's the staff from James Madison in 1992, and they have
yeah,
6 NFL head coaches on
right.
there. You know
There's
what I
like
mean?
young Bruce Arians with a mullet, and there's
Right,
like
right, right.
all these
Just
guys, and they all end up being.
his
And the
college
other
career
thing,
ended a year ago. You know,
right? Yeah, exactly. Uh, Sean McVay's staffs keeps getting poached and poached and poached. And if they're good, then it's funny because Belichick continues to get poached because you look for the best coach, guys under him. And like Mike Vrabel's the only one that's really been good
yeah,
coming
yeah,
out
yeah.
of that group. So it's like teams
Like,
might maybe be like, maybe Bill's not passing down his magic as much as guys like Shanahan and Mike Shanahan and Andy Reid are. So
right. I mean, like McDermott and Tomlin were teammates at William and Mary. You
yeah,
know, like, and now they've won a ton of
yeah,
games. You know, like, what's going on
exactly.
here? Right.
Yeah, and so and getting in young, I mean, it's look, nepotism is huge in the NFL. It
Oh,
helps. And it makes you better being able to grow up around it, and you get access and you get to learn things that other guys have to fight and fight and fight and fight for. And that's why a lot of head coaches don't get a shot until they're in their 50s, where some of
mhm.
these other guys who are related to somebody get their shots right out of college, and they get to be a quality control for some coach, and then they get to move up a lot quicker because they have the better access. So a lot of times it's who you know. Look at this last hiring session. Ryan Poles, who do you hire? Someone he was really familiar with in Eberflus. And you thought, oh, Matt Eberflus, that's an interesting name. You don't know a lot about him, but there's a connection there, and they know each other from past experience. Joe Shane comes over from the Bills. Who's he hire? The guy from the Bills for the New York Giants,
Yeah,
right?
right, right,
He
right.
hires Brian Dable. So look for the connections there and the personal connections, and you'll probably find who those next hires are going to be, right or wrong.
So 2 things to add to that is one of my best buds went to John Carroll, which is in Ohio. It's close to here. Not exactly a football factory, but like 5 or 6 NFL GMs played at John Carroll. Why? I mean, is there something? I don't think they have a class how to be a GM that you take after geometry. You know,
Yeah.
like at John Carroll. And then the other thing is, this didn't occur to me because I went to media after I got fired. But one of the best things you can do as a coach is get fired, as long as you get hired again, because they spend so much time together. You're on a staff with 15 other coaches. You all get fired. They all go somewhere else. And all of a sudden you're tight with your new 15 coaches. And then he's like, well, how about I just met this new running back coach. You should hire him. You know, so it's just a great way to network is getting hired and fired.
Absolutely.
And there's no shame in getting fired in this job. It's not like, you know, a lot of walks of life, man, he got fired. I can't ever hire him again. It's like, no, you're a football coach. You got fired 20 times. Who cares?
Yeah. So, long answer short, we have no idea, but
Right.
there's definitely some names out there, guys like D'Amico Ryans, Mike Kafka, and some hot names that you start to hear. But go look at the teams that are in the playoffs and find out who their eldest coordinators are, or hot young coordinators. How about like
The
someone like
quarterback coaches. And,
right? Yeah,
right.
someone like Ben Johnson for the Lions. Their offense is going crazy right now. He's a young guy who's all of a sudden just like, oh, okay, he's going to be on the radar now.
Yeah. Another example, because I happen to know a couple of these guys. It's not a bad idea to be Aaron Rodgers' quarterback coach. Like Ben McAdoo was there, and then he became the Giants head coach. I was GA'd with Ben. And then, Denver's head coach
Nathaniel
had
Hackett.
taken that path. And now Luke Getsy goes from there to the Bears OC. It's not bad to be a really good quarterback's coach.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Go start as a quality control under a Shanahan or a Reed, and then go on to be a quarterback's coach somewhere and network
Good
like
start.
hell, and make sure people like you and never see your family and sleep at the facility.
Yes.
There you go.
I had enough of that.
Exactly. All right, next. Let's talk about some of the quarterbacks that ended their careers. Who did it best? Talking Brady, Manning, Montana, Favre, and which teams peaking or ending peaks very near future. Next. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Bet Online, your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Don't forget to get informed before you make your bets, and you can do both at Bet Online. Get all the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. We're talking coaches just now. Which coaches could be fired? You can bet on that at Bet Online for sure. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball to World Cup, they've got it all covered for you at betonline.net. Of course, all of those weekly odds and Super Bowl futures and draft stuff starting to pop up as well at BetOnline.
I don't know if you and I have ever had this conversation, but BetOnline's so awesome. I wish I was a cricket expert or some of the crazy things you can bet on there. I bet you can make a fortune. If I knew as much about cricket as I knew the NFL, I would be killing it on BetOnline.
I've tried to figure out cricket, and I just don't understand what's happening.
I mean, any of those oddball sports is my point. There's no way they know more than me about it. If I knew this much about cricket or e-golf or whatever the heck's.
Oh, there's esports too. So
right.
Talk to your teenage son about the esports and maybe get some inside info. Maybe make a little cash in the Williamson household.
Sign up.
Always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head over to BetOnline today, the website or mobile device, to learn more at BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, Matt, really quick here. This is a funny question from MWE, me, Emilio, on okay. Not me, but Emilio, who goes by me.
Yeah,
with double E,
with 2 E's.
On Twitter. Yeah, there you go. If this is Brady's last season, he says, which quarterback had the better last season? Brady, Manning, Montana, or Favre? I don't know if Emilio remembers Favre's Minnesota Vikings days, but it was bad.
His Jets days were bad too.
Yeah, and so I have to imagine Brett Favre's end of career was one of the worst. I was super annoyed by Brett Favre's end of career, first of all, because as a young 49ers fan growing up and those Packers teams that I hated Brett Favre, and then the nonstop coverage of the retirement. Is he going to retire? Is he going to unretire? And it was like every day, every summer, it felt like. It was like, this is super annoying.
And Rodgers was looming, and then he's on a couple different teams. That was bad at the end, yeah.
But at the end, Favre came back and was throwing more interceptions than touchdowns, and he had a couple of, nice moments. But I think Favre's was pretty bad at the end, and Manning could barely throw. He had the neck problem, and that wasn't great. I would say Brady right now is better than both of those, even though it's not ending the way he would necessarily like. He's still chucking the ball like 40 times a game, even though it's not high output. It's very, low depth of target stuff for Tom Brady right now, but it's not a disaster. And he's not falling on his face, and he doesn't look like he doesn't belong in the NFL or anything like that.
Right. He's still an NFL starting quarterback.
Right. And in Joe Montana's days, he was hurt a lot and banged up at the end of his 49ers career, and then kind of a little bit with the Chiefs, but had some nice runs with the Chiefs as well and made the playoffs. And in fact, I'm looking at it right now because I couldn't remember how it
I was trying to rely on you on that last year for Montana.
Yeah.
The other ones I can talk about, I don't remember how he went out, that final season.
I had to pull it up. And so 92 with the Niners, he was banged up and then got traded to Kansas City, and then had some really good runs. And in 1994, his last season, 38 years old, the Chiefs were 9-5, completing 60% of his passes. So he was, he was Joe
I don't
Montana.
remember him ever bumbling around out there. That's why.
Yeah, he didn't look, he got out at the right time, and he looked a little bit more brittle, and he was never a big guy to begin with. So I think getting blindsided by Lawrence Taylor in the 80s, it was like he got blasted
a little bit. Yeah, not the biggest guy.
Missed
Jim
some.
Burt crushed him that one time.
Did miss some time in the early 90s to injury, but he went out, I would say, as good or better than any of them. So I would say Montana, Brady above Manning and Favre.
Yeah. Have to mention that Peyton did win the Super Bowl. Well, his team won the Super Bowl. He was a shell of himself, but he still had the mind. The Von Miller-led fantastic defense, but his leadership did pay dividends, I'm sure, and in knowing where to go with football. But you're right, he couldn't throw the ball. I mean, to me, Brady's better than all those guys in their last year. And I wanted to take it a little bit of a step further. I mean, historically, this usually doesn't go well. Joe Namath was a Ram for his last year, and there's a lot of those where great Hall of Famers, you'd like to erase that last year from your memory. And so, Favre is certainly probably one of those as well. But I want to go with it is the recent ones. I mean, Eli, Breeze, Matt Ryan this year, maybe Matt Stafford this year, Ben. Rivers wasn't bad. I mean, Rivers last year was acceptable, but he probably got out right before it was bad. But I mean, this next group of guys that are going to be Hall of Famers or near Hall of Famers, that last memory of them wasn't so fond. I mean, Eli's getting benched, things like that.
Yeah, like thinking of like Joe Namath back in the day, kind of like tiptoeing around. It's like, you're old, get out of it. It's like a lot of these guys hang on just kind of that year too long and then remind themselves, oh man, okay, yeah, I think it's time to go. And you start to get pushed out.
Yeah. Oh, a good one though is Elway, because Elway was Josh Allen, for people that don't know. I mean, as a young bucking Bronco, and I said Bronco on purpose, he was as talented as anyone on the planet and would always take his teams to the playoffs. And everyone's like, this guy's a loser. He keeps losing Super Bowls. And I always urge people, I'm like, name me some Broncos Elway played with. They'll be like, oh, the Three Amigos. I'm like, well, who are the Three Amigos? Can you name me the Three Amigos? Do you know who Ricky Natil is? Anyway. But then he transformed himself and he got kind of rickety like an old gunslinger and more bow-legged and couldn't run like he used to, and handed it off to T. Davis and Shanahan and won the Super Bowl and showed a little humility. You know what I mean? Like I don't have to be a rocket launcher.
Three Amigos. That's a good reference there. And yeah,
right.
I can't
like
name
Mark
those Three
Jackson.
Amigos. The only Three Amigos I can name is Martin Short, Chevy Chase, and who's the other? Steve Martin. Yeah. All right. Good stuff.
And the singing bush.
Apologies to all the questions we did not get to. Appreciate all the listeners out there and all the questions we get. Always feel free to drop us one any old time or respond when we ask for those questions every week on our mailbag segments at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL on Twitter, or drop one in the YouTube comments. Matt and I back tomorrow. It's Thursday already, and we'll be getting ready
Game day
for the week 15 schedule, including that Thursday night football game. We're going to start having some Saturday games too to talk about, Matt. All that coming up this week on Peacock and Williamson.